Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It. I'm your podcast host, Robert Davis. Appreciate you all for tuning in. Appreciate the support that you've all shown. Follow me on Instagram, um, username RTD underscore III. Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Podcast is on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts as well. If you need if you want it on a different medium, just let me know and I'll try to see about getting it up there for you. So in today's episode, I kind of want to talk about the Diddy trial, and I didn't want to talk about this yet because I like to wait until things have been completely the story is completely unfolded before I really start to talk about things and give my opinion on it because I like to talk full kind of facts and stuff at the time, like when I publicly state type of things like this. Um, at this moment in time, the verdict came out, and I think Diddy is currently awaiting sentencing. And so we'll see, still where this goes. But just to recap, this trial has been kind of like a hot topic for pop culture, mainly because of Diddy being a very popular, successful, wealthy individual. You know, and being the nature of the case with the video that came out and everything. Well, let me rewind back. This just talking about this has been a very hot topic of our culture as of late. And obviously, when any rich, famous person is under trial for something, that becomes a big deal. To kind of recap the case really quickly, Diddy was had five charges against him. RICO, racketeering, if you want to call it, and I'm kind of paraphrasing this, so excuse me. Um, he had two counts of sex trafficking, one in relation to Cassie, his ex girlfriend, another relation to another female he used to be involved with, Jane Doe. And then he had two counts of transportation for prostitution. I'm paraphrasing that a little bit as well in terms of the name of that felony, but that was again also in relation to Cassie and Jane Doe. A lot of this, in terms of the trial and everything, kind of started off with the leaking of a hotel video, that a lot of people saw in regards to Diddy physically assaulting Cassie in a hotel hallway. And I think he was dragging her back into the room, kicking her. It was very disgraceful and disgusting stuff to watch. But and nonetheless, it's what came out, and it was obviously a few years old. But that kind of opened the door into kind of like the downfall of Diddy's public image, at least. Um, it also brought in the thing about the freak offs, which was assumed to be kind of like the Diddy parties, the wild, crazy, sex filled, celebrity filled Diddy parties that were kind of rumored to be going on, and they might actually be going on, but they weren't a part of this case essentially. Um, but that all of those things, kind of just to recap where we were with Diddy and what's been going on with him lately. And now that the verdict is out that he was found not guilty on the RICO racketeering charge or count, not guilty on the two counts of sex trafficking, and he was found guilty for the two counts of transportation for prostitution purposes, which could be considered to be, or should be considered, quite honestly, to be the lesser of the counts, the or the less serious of the counts, I should say. And with that being said, it's polarizing opinions out. Some people feel like Diddy was able to beat, he was able to beat the system, which was unjustly trying to be against him. Other people feel as if Diddy did what rich people do and got off easy for stuff that he should have been punished for. There's a lot of polarizing opinions on both sides of the matter, and how you look at it. I'll speak of my opinions on it a little later in the episode, but how you look at it could really swing different ways. And this isn't like the OJ trial of our time per se, but I think it's close. I don't think it's close, but it has that similar type of ring to it. And so just to speak about why this matters for a moment. First is this is a representation, one way or the other, however you want to look at it, of what powerful people, especially men, can get away with. I'm going to talk about this from multiple perspectives because I do believe in seeing the world from multiple perspectives. Perspective of a male, perspective of a black man, perspective of a human being, perspective of a lot of different things, of a professional perspective of a lawyer, perspective of a lot of different concepts, right? And so the first I want to speak about it is the concept of it is a representation of what powerful men can get away with. I mean, whether you believe Diddy was rightfully charged or whether you believe this was like a facade to embarrass him or whatever the case may be, the end of the day, he was physically assaulting these women, and he got away. I mean, and he got away with it. He wasn't charged with it. Essentially, charged with transportation for prostitution purposes, but they wasn't charged with physically assaulting these women. He wasn't charged with beating up Cassie in a hotel hallway, punching her, throwing stuff at her. Um, he wasn't charged with any of these things or any other type of things that he's been accused of in the past. Diddy's been accused of moving like a crime lord. Of physically assaulting people, shooting people, hurting people, intimidating people, extorting them, blackmailing them, all sorts of craziness. But we'll get again. It's a representation, but this particular part is just a representation of they brought out. Of if you have enough money, then it doesn't matter. What you do, it'll be swept under the rug. Or he makes music good, so what does it matter if he beats this girl? Um, and at the same time, I do believe that this is also a representation of America embarrassing a black man just to put him in his place. And like not to say that it isn't also a representation of what strong men can get away with, but and I don't like to use the argument, but if white people would have did it, or white men can do this, or white people can do this, and but when a black person does it, I don't like to use that argument. But I will say that I do believe that given the charges that were brought against them, given the verdict that came out, given the evidence presented, it did not seem to me that the intent was to criminally convict Diddy. It seemed to me the intent was to pretty much put um, information that was held private or held under wraps into open view that would defame and embarrass him. Like it seemed to me the process was more or less what they wanted him to go through. And people could talk about there was rumors that Diddy had pissed off the Ciroc and the alcohol industry, and I think he did piss somebody off who wanted to teach him a lesson and humble him and embarrass him, destroy his business relationships. And not to say that the acts that he did aren't one that perpetuate that you shouldn't be. I mean, that you should be punished for some of this stuff. But I do think that the intent on why all this came out was not to convict him, but was to embarrass him publicly. Um, but I do think that another reason why this matters is that it brings up the topic of victimhood and kind of, I guess, domestic abuse or abusive relationships or situations. And I'm going to I'll speak about Cassie and Jane Doe to a degree later in the episode. But one thing I want to talk about generally here, one thing I've always said is that you don't have to be 100% innocent to be a victim. And I think that, you do have to understand your culpability in the matter, but it doesn't mean that you 100% just deserve everything that's happened to you. And I think that's something that I wish that our culture or our society, especially young men, could be more nuanced in speaking on or thinking about. And I mean, because I think we always want to say, "But you did wrong." Like, yeah, but it doesn't. I mean, there's levels to it. You know what I mean? Like, you can have done wrong and still have wrong done to you. I mean, but you just can't sit there and act like you've never done anything wrong yourself, or that you didn't do anything to put yourself in that situation. Doesn't mean that you're automatically deserving of just the worst of the worst. Um, but I think it does require. I think that sort of conversation requires nuance, and it requires empathy and understanding on both sides. Quite frankly, it requires empathy and understanding from the side of those that would feel like they were the abused. I believe to understand how people are coming to that conclusion, and they usually do, quite honestly. And I think it also on the other side, where the more challenging part is the empathy for the other, for people that are looking at it from the outside in, to understand that it's not as black and white as it looks, and it's not as simple as it looks. And there's gray areas in everything, and it doesn't mean that you can't just sum everything up as completely right, completely wrong. Just because it feels easy to you doesn't make it actually right. But the other thing is, I think this is representation of how money can sponsor depravity. And when I say that, I mean to say that money doesn't. I don't. Money changes people in the sense that it makes you more of what you are. So if you have morals and standards, money won't change those morals and standards. Your actions will still revolve around those morals and standards. If you have dark impulses that you succeed to, then money will sponsor those dark impulses, because it will provide you more resources to use it, to do it. Sorry, or to enjoy them, or to assuage them, whatever the case may be. And I think that's where we kind of are with, in the sense of Diddy. I think is when you have that much money and power, you can feel like you're untouchable. You can feel like you can do some of the things that he's been accused of outside of the trial. You can feel like you can beat your girl in a hotel hallway and drag her, and then pay the people for the video, and just and when it comes out, make a video with a half-hearted apology. You can do that. When you have money, I think it sponsors that sort of depravity, if you were the type of person to do it in the first place. So then, to talk about some, I guess, specific examples of kind of just what's been going on with this, the charges. So I talked about this a little bit, but the charges of racketeering and sex trafficking specifically did not match the evidence provided. Racketeering means there had to be some sort of conspiracy, criminal conspiracy going on to benefit more than one person. And what we found was that it was kind of a whole bunch of domestic relationship type of issues, and stories of drug use, sex, these voyeurism, sex. The freak offs were more voyeurism than anything else, in terms of what they were presented to be. And I think in looking at that, and none of it proved that there was any sort of criminal conspiracy or enterprise going on. I think the prosecution dropped, I think, some of the kidnapping and arson, some of the stuff that they had alleged under the racketeering that you would have to do to prove that conspiracy type of thing going on over a span of like 10 years, I think, or something like that. But they couldn't prove it. And the sex trafficking was almost similar, because sex trafficking was sex trafficking at its base assumes that you are trafficking women or men or whatever, sexually for profit. Like, it has to be a profit for it. It has to be a business to it. Diddy, in the concept of what they showed, and that's why it was transportation for prostitution type of thing, is what he actually was convicted of, was that there was no profit. He was not physically selling Cassie or Jane Doe. He was not physically promoting them for sex in terms of selling them. He was making them have sex parties, and making being kind of a argumentative word in the sense of what the trial was arguing. But there was no evidence of business for profit in terms of trafficking them or making them have sex in order for him to profit financially or business wise. And racketeering in the same concept. It was only, all of this was so Diddy could enjoy his life personally. That's not racketeering. There's no business enterprise and a criminal element to that. And the other part of this was, quite frankly, that I found to be interesting, especially as an attorney, was that almost substantial to almost all of the evidence was testimony. And not to say that people were lying or anything like that. I genuinely didn't believe most of the people that were on that stand were. Some of them might have embellished a little bit in terms of it, but I don't think anybody generally was lying. I think, but the problem with testimony becomes that testimony on its face is not gospel, and you would think that federal prosecutors who have been trying cases all their life know that. Like, you can't convict somebody strictly off of testimony because it can be scrutinized as there's nothing to support it or back it up. So while everything, if you base your case, when you say racketeering, but you really base your case off of his domestic kind of issues with two women, and all you have is testimony of that, and the racketeering case is over. They were doing drugs, and he has access to drugs, and he has access to things that make it easier for to have sex and all these things. That's not physical proof. That's not physical records. That's not physical evidence of anything wrong. And that's why the charges didn't stick. The charges sticked on the transportation for prostitution because they could physically say, we see records where you moved her, you moved the sex worker to, whatever the case may be, to a different location for the concept of sex for money. That's transportation for prostitution. Like, we can physically convict that, but we can't convict racketeering or RICO. We can't convict sex trafficking because that's not, like, you're moving somebody to pay for sex. Yeah, that's prostitution. You're not moving somebody in order to profit from them having sex. Like, the monetarily profit. That's not sex trafficking. So it kind of got to this point where there's no guns, there's no money, there's no records of anything going on, or any sort of violence or anything in terms of intimidation or murders or anything that you would see kind of associated with these racketeering type of cases, extortion, bribery, blackmail, none of this. So it goes back to the point of where it just felt like, because the charges did not match the evidence presented, that there was no real intent to convict him on the charges that were presented. It was just to put his business out in the street. With that being said, I do think that the baby oil stuff, the whole baby oil thing and joke and all that, it's a stigma, and rightfully so, most likely, in my opinion, that he will never live down. And I don't know if this will completely ruin Diddy's reputation, being that I don't know if he'll be able to make a public comeback, but I know it has severely damaged it. And the question is that rightful that it has severely damaged? I think so. I do. Now, being honest with you, I didn't think that Diddy should. I think that Diddy is guilty of a lot of things. I don't think that he was guilty of the things that they charged him of, and I didn't think that he should have been convicted on the things that they charged him of. Or to the point, I really kind of agree with the verdict that has come out. I do think that if that there's many things that they can convict him of, and there's probably many things he needs to answer for, but what they tried to isn't that. And I do think they tried to because they wanted to publicly shame and embarrass him. Now, with that being said, that puts it in a weird situation for me, because it's like, damn, so did he deserve it? Yes. Is it fucked up? Yes. But yeah, like, is it rightful that his reputation is going to be going through all this, and people are going to be talking about with the baby oil and all that stuff for the rest of his life? I think it's deserved, in the sense that he has other things that he need to answer for, and while this doesn't directly atone for that, it somewhat not makes up for it, but it somewhat punishes him for it. True. I mean, I guess so, But another thing I want to talk about in terms of it, just another example, is that Cassie and Jane Doe are, while they're not completely innocent, they are victims. Again, you don't have to be completely innocent in a situation to be a victim of it, but you do have to understand your culpability in the situation. I don't remember much of Jane Doe's testimony. I forget if she even did. I think she did. It'll come back to me while I'm talking about this. I promise you it will. I remember Cassie's. And in listening to Cassie's testimony, and this is something that, honestly, survivors of domestic or abusive relationships, I shouldn't say domestic, survivors of abusive relationships show a lot of. And which is quite, honestly, it's scarily heroic that they do because of how much criticism they receive, especially in the sense of the internet and how they responded to Cassie and oh you deserved it and oh you stayed so therefore you deserve what he was doing and oh you were just trying to get like a lot of times survivors in these situations or people that have endured these situations have a level of empathy and understanding of how people view them of how and if not sometimes they even agree with it and in listening to Cassie's testimony she showed to me that level of empathy and understanding and not saying that oh she needed to be but like she never was sitting out there in my opinion being like oh woe was me and none of this would have happened if it wasn't for him and you know everything was his fault like saying you know she was saying like yeah I love this man like we did this stuff. You know, like not to say like she didn't endure things and she talked about it, but that you know she stayed because she loved him. She stayed because she was part of this, and you know she wanted to make this work with him, and to and it wasn't a kind of a thing of saying oh a cop out of oh you see what he was doing, you see what he was doing, but just of you know this was the situation, and I think that's something that can be respected. And I think, you know, to a degree, Jane Doe, I think to a degree was similar in that sense. And again, I think that's where you can understand to where it's like, okay, I get it. You know, you're in a situation with a man who can provide you life and experience that 99.9% of individuals can't. And with that sort of power and reach, it is understandable how you can feel at times smothered by that. And while yes, you could in theory at any time leave, and while yes, you probably did at sometimes have actual rational, not rational, actual opportunities to do so, not just theoretical, but actual opportunity to do so, it's still understandable how you could be stuck in that nexus. And I mean, and you don't have to always be completely right in the situation again to recognize that you're a victim of it just you might not be 100% a victim but you are a victim of it and I think as long as you can speak to that you know that's all that matters. um I feel bad switching to the next part example I want to talk about right after this but like one thing that just was crazy is that whatever they pay like how much I forget how much Cassie settlement agreement was with Diddy. Her settlement agreement with him not to bring any charges or anything like that against her, you know, personally, civilly. I think it was the 30 million or something like that. It wasn't enough because like they had described it like 4 day long freak offs, and the freak offs were essentially just voyeurism. So you know, like that is like that's when you rich and you got time. Like you know what I mean? Like 4 days long, 3 days, you know, that for days at a time where you know he's in a corner rubbing semen on himself, masturbating, watching you have sex with some guy. Like that's craziness. That's craziness to me. Just in terms of the stamina needed for that, and just the like you didn't bored during them 4 days at any point, chapped anything like you know what I mean. Like so, but you know the concept of the, but the even the weird thing regarding that the freak offs was that when it was described to actually what they were, people thought, and one of the reasons people were so interested in this was people thought, oh, the freak offs are like these celebrity crazed sex parties, right? And you know, it's all these people's back rooms with all famous people and TD Jakes being a power bottom and all sort of stuff like that. And it turned out it was just Diddy, his girl, and you know, a sex worker, voyeurism, him watching, like just pretty tame, regular stuff. And it just happened to go on for long periods of time with lots of drugs. But that was it. And it's just nothing like what we thought it was. And I don't say that for any particular reason. I mean, like, you're into what you're into. I ain't judging it in any particular way. It just, it's interesting how, it's interesting the reality of things when they really come out. And sometimes how it just isn't what we thought it was, you know? And the internet's fascination and the fascination, the coverage, the response to it has been just epic. You know, like we've had Shade Room and other social media news outlets covering it step by step. The news has been covering it. People have just been fascinated with it the whole time. All the jokes about the baby oil and dancing and him being in jail, and the gray hair and the courtroom sketches and the family outside and the people celebrating and making outbursts in the courtrooms and all sort of stuff. It's been a fascinating and entertaining thing to watch from just a third party's perspective of just like being entertained by the internet. Um, and I mean, I think obviously because the internet's going to go to town on anything it can, but it's just been funny to watch. Um, Now, one thing is Diddy is likely coming home soon. Just to be real about it. Um, just the two felony charges of transportation of individuals for prostitution, meaning he was literally transporting individuals in order to engage in acts of prostitution. So those felony charges carry a sentence, I think a maximum of 10 years each. So he's facing currently a maximum of 20 years. Very rarely does anybody receive the maximum charge unless there was some extreme punitive measure that was meant to be behind it, which won't be the case here. They don't really have a reason to try to throw the book at him in terms of he hasn't been disrespectful in the courtroom or anything like that, or he has any past. Even though there's a lot of allegations and stories about him, there's no actual criminal record to be like, oh yeah, we need to to make this stick. Um, and so he's already been in prison for like close to a year. By the time they sentence him, I mean they'll probably give him close to about a year for time served. I wouldn't be shocked if he received 2 3 years sentence, um, and then get a year for time served, and probably just get house arrest or probation for the rest of it. I doubt go after his sentencing. I doubt he serves any more actual jail time, any more time in detention or containment, or detainment. Sorry. Um, and so yeah, he is likely coming home soon, likely by Christmas. He'll likely be at home for Christmas party at Diddy's house. um, and I'm not sure if this will publicly damage his. I'm not sure if this will permanently damage his public image. Sorry. And the reason I'm not sure is that it's due to the support that he has, mainly from the I was gonna say mainly from the black community, but it's from the rich white community, and I guess the white community, rich white community as well. It's going to be a lot of people that are going to be turned off to him, and rightfully they should be because of what he did. It was disgusting, but in Circassia, it was what he. But in terms of this particular trial, it garnered so much, it garnered so much feeling from the black community in terms of, oh, here you go trying to crucify another successful black man, that there was a lot of support for him behind this on the internet. A lot, not just on the internet, in real life. A lot of famous people are supporting him. And I think in terms of that, you know, there's going to be people that are going to embrace him when he makes if he makes a public return, or if he tries to make a return to his public image. There are going to be people that are going to embrace them. Famous people, rich people, people in positions to make him successful again. And I'm not gonna say successful again like his money went away. He's still gonna be extremely wealthy and rich, but he's still gonna have those resources to do that as well. So I'm not sure if this will permanently damage his public image, but it will take work if it doesn't. Actually, I don't think anything permanently damages anybody's image. So actually, I'm sure it won't. Nothing permanently damages anybody's public image anymore. Now that I think about it, everybody always has a way to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Make a way to get their name back out. If that lady Casey Anthony could get back on TikTok and make videos and stuff, then anybody can. Um, and so, but it does bring back the next question of how will he rebuild his brand, or should he try even? Like that's. And some people gonna be like, no, he doesn't deserve to do it. And some people be like, hey, if I got off after all this and knowing what people know about me, I'd just be quiet. Some people be like, hey, no, man, go out there, Diddy bop some more, get your money. How will he respond to this? Will he try to make a public comeback? Personally, I think he will. I don't see why he wouldn't, but maybe. I mean, Diddy kind of older now, so maybe not. He might just stay in the background. He might, push his kids' products. I mean, his kids' projects instead, and try, make money off of his artists and his businesses, and just push his kids' projects. He might try to go more back into the business world because white people will still deal with him. Some cut their business ties with him, but as long as they ain't got to put him on the front page or TV, they'll still work with him. His money's still green, as the old folks would say. Will he seek revenge on those that made jokes about him, that testified against him, that did these interviews and these documentaries against him? Will he seek revenge? That's something I think they need to think about. Will he try to rebuild his legacy or rebuild his empire? Um, I believe he most definitely might try. Um, but I think these are things that we have to kind of be aware of, and just thinking about, is it something that he should do? Personally, I think if I was him, I'd be in the background. I'd make my money through my businesses. I'd keep, working like that. I'd push my kids' projects and my businesses and stuff. And I wouldn't even be trying to be a public figure anymore. But when you've been like that your whole life, you might just. So to speak about some concerns, I guess, that come with this, I think one, the joy that people, especially a lot of men, kind of exuded when the verdict came out, it can be somewhat misplaced and can be viewed as offensive and arrogant. And like, it's because what he did was wrong, like, and like, I understand the concept of rooting for a black man to beat the system. I But it does bring up, why would you root for him to beat the system if he actually didn't beat the system? Like, not if he actually didn't beat the system, if he actually did what he was convicted of. Like, I've always said that I feel like one of the tricks with black people and equality was that it can be looked at in two different ways, but nobody ever talks about it. And the first way is, do we want to be treated like white people? Or the second way is, do we want white people to be treated like us? I don't think there's a middle. I think asking for a middle is asking for an imaginary concept that doesn't exist, and we live in reality where there's two different truths. And like, I think in this particular sense, I can understand that it's the sense of the happiness that Diddy is free because a black man beat the system where it would seem to be designed to punish him or to defame him or to convict him. And it could have been seen unjustly in terms of what he was convicted of. But at the same time, he was physically assaulting this woman for multiple years, and both of these women for multiple years. And I think that does have to be somewhat understood, empathized with, when, even if you were happy that he got out, or if you didn't think he should go to jail, you still have to understand, like, yeah, but he still did some fucked up shit. So when you see those people out there that were like drenching themselves in baby oil, dancing and celebrating that he got off, like, I understand why. But think about it from the concept of any young woman that had dealt with any sort of situation like that, and her seeing that, and her being like, I was Cassie in my own situation, not with, obviously might not have been with a Diddy, but like, I was Cassie in I was in a situation similar to her, and to see you all celebrating somebody that, for getting off or doing things similar to what, my abuser had did, how you think that would make her feel? You might not care how that makes her feel, because you might get her bad the black man got off. I understand that, but like, it still have to empathize with that, just like you would expect, or you would ask her to empathize with you. You need to empathize with that. Another concern I have is this concept, and I spoke about it before. I hate the concept of, but when white people do it, like, because we use it as a justification to do wrong, and it's not an excuse. And like, and it goes back again to, I personally believe equality is really black people being treated like white people. No, I think equality is really black people, white people being treated like black people. I really think that's equality, because I think equality is when nobody's allowed to break the rules. If everybody's allowed to break rules, then it's not equal still. It's just do everybody do whatever the fuck they want. There really is no equality in that. Like, it's theoretically equal, but if I can walk around and just killing everybody because I can do whatever the fuck I want, and you're living in fear of me because there's nothing to say that I can't, but you can do whatever the fuck you want too, is that really equality? And that's usually how, most of the time, how those free reign type of situations work. But the concept with the Diddy thing was, oh yeah, but if he was one of these white men, y'all would let him go, and so no, we don't need to, or yeah, it's only because he was black. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but again, when he's actually done this stuff, like, there are enough black millionaires, not a lot of black millionaires and billionaires, but if there's enough out there that's not doing, breaking the law in horrific ways to support, to not feel like, oh, if this one is getting tried for some shit that he did, that nah, it shouldn't, because he's a black man. Now, in the Diddy case, the Diddy trial, it's a little, to me, it's a little bit different, because I felt like the obviously, again, the intent was to defame and humiliate him, not to convict him. So I think it was the concept that it probably was a racial intent behind it, in which again goes back to why I understand people's kind of support of him in this instance. But I still think justifying that, oh, what he did was right because white people do it and get away with it, is still bullshit. Like, white people should go to jail for it too. We should, and white people should too. And the other concern I have, well, another concern I have, it's like the other concern, but another concern I have is that, and I spoke about this a little bit before, is that the villainization of Cassie and Jane Doe, I'm speaking about Cassie specifically. Sorry. The villainization of Cassie is unjustified. Like, I get that she signed a settlement agreement. Most people in her situation would. Like, I don't like villainizing people for doing things that rational people would do in their situation. Like, whether you agree with it or not, it is a rational act. Some people could say, well, I would have I would have stood up, I would have went to the police, I would have did that, I wouldn't have took a deal, I would have brought charges, and blah 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 blah. You might have, but it's rational to understand why she didn't. And because of that, I don't think you should villainize her, as like, oh, you deserve it. Like, the type of crazy shit that they have to say to her is that, oh, that she deserved for this to happen to her. Oh, as she gets up there and talks about abuse she endured, oh, you don't feel embarrassed. Your husband knows that you got a train ran on you, that you've been doing this and that. Like, I think that this sort of wanting to embarrass and villainize her is just like, why? Like, she has not already felt bad enough and done, like, at this stuff enough. A lot of this stuff she's felt on her own. So why are we trying to make her, like, I don't want to say humble her. Women like to say, oh yeah, I'll try. I don't think it's like humble her, but like, why are you trying to like break this woman's spirit like that? Break her into thinking she isn't something that she is. Like, she's still a human being. Like, and like, doesn't deserve, like, this concept of making it feel like, oh, just all the bad things that happen to you, you deserve that shit because you a bad person. And like, I think that's just a little extreme. And because, like, her story is not uncommon and it's not irrational for someone to endure that. And it's not irrational for someone to respond the way that she responded. It's not irrational for someone to look at it still in the way that she's looking at it still. And so I just think that, it goes back to having empathy and grace and looking at things with a bit of nuance, to where you can say, yeah, you might not have been, you might have been with this man because of the things he can provide. Like I always said myself that the thing about Cassie was, to me, was that she was with Diddy because he could provide her thing. I won't say things. I don't want to make it sound monetary, but he could provide her a lifestyle and opportunities, for a career and stuff, in a way that other avenues could not. And so it may put you in a situation to where you say, do you put up with this abuse in order to endure or take advantage, but in order to still be the recipient of the those benefits that come on the other half of that abuse. Just because you say yes does not mean, oh, then you deserve to get hit. I think it's rational to understand that. It's rational to say I can deal with this in order to be with this person because of that. At the same time, I think, and to the point where I go back to saying where I could respect Cassie, was that I felt like her testimony and stuff was representative of that, in the sense that, I was with him for this reason. I and we were doing these things for this reason, and it wasn't, oh, this was all his idea and he forced me and all this. It was that they were equal participants in the matter. And I think the last concern that I have, I spoke about it again, this part as well. For those that spoke out, the jokes, the interviews, documentaries, all that, just what now? Especially if he's home in like 6 months, what now? In 5 months, in 5 months, what now? You know, like, are you afraid that you gonna catch a car bomb? Are you afraid you gonna catch a cease and desist? You afraid that that things are gonna happen to you? I don't know. Like I would be, and I feel bad because it's not even just, and I'm not saying that in the concept of being like, oh, that's why you shouldn't have testified. No, I feel like you spoke your truth. I hope that there is, like, given that the outcome isn't probably what they wanted, I hope that there is some sense of safety for them. Now, I ain't saying that it's the government or anybody particular right or duty or responsibility to provide that, but I do hope that they have some sense of safety that he's not going to come after them. So, to conclude, I think first off, I think Diddy deserves, quite honestly, to be in jail for a lot of things, just not what he was charged for. And the trial and this whole ordeal was intended to embarrass and shame his image, but not to criminally punish him. If they wanted to convict him on stuff, I feel like with them raiding his houses, I don't even know if they would have found it, but I feel like if they wanted to convict him on actual crimes related to RICO, or actual crimes related to racketeering, actual crimes related to assault, robbery, extortion, all these different things, then they could have found evidence of that. Actual evidence of that, and it wouldn't have had anything to do with Cassie, quite frankly. It would have been dealing with musicians and producers and people he was doing business with and all this shit. Like, if they wanted to find that, then, and if they wanted to find that and the intent was to truly criminally punish him for something that he's done, then that would have been there. And regardless of our opinion, like regardless of it one way or the other, he will have the right to continue his life however he wants. And whether that's him living quietly, whether that's him going back heavily into business, heavily back into the public space, the public sphere, how if he decides to embrace this, like, oh, fuck y'all, I'm do me, whether he tries to act like he's a changed man, whatever the case may be, it's his right to do so. Tried by a jury of his peers. It is definitely his right to do so. I think all that we can do, quite frankly, from the concept of this particular case, is just pray that he comes out a better man. And we've heard stories of Diddy's vindictiveness, his temper, his anger. And so all we can do is hope that, this experience has opened something different in him to where he is not looking to, what's the word I'm looking for? He's not looking to act in those similar ways anymore. Maybe, maybe not. I guess time can only tell. So thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Again, this is the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. I am your host, Robert Davis. Again, follow me on Instagram, username RRTD_III. Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Again, podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio. Again, appreciate you all. See you on the next time. All right. Love y'all. Out.